the literal heart, what it means to have a good figurative heart and a good literal heart, right? So today I'm going to help you guys go over learning about some of the different parts of the heart that you've been talking about. So Miss Westling sent me a list of all the different terms you've been learning. And so under here I do have some hearts that are actually from a pig. There's actually several of them that we were able to get so that we could look at some of the different parts. Because did you guys know that pigs' hearts actually look a lot like a human heart? Very, very, very similar. Okay, there's just a few small differences that we'll go through, but also there's something that can happen that's really cool. So I know you talked a little bit about, you were saying that what happens when a heart valve, those valves, those things that we see here between the different chambers of the heart, when they don't work right, we can actually take a valve from a pig and a surgeon can transplant that into a human heart. We can borrow and use their valve for a while to help somebody's heart function the way that it should if theirs wasn't working right. So we can talk more about that too, okay? But yes, they are very, very similar. So, what's that? They're,
let's let her do her
yeah,
thing.
yep. Well, I'm gonna go through some of this stuff. And then I did bring some gloves that anybody that feels like they want to will be able to come up and kind of feel and poke at it a little bit and take a closer look after we finish up going through some of the basic stuff. Okay?
Carry on.
Yep.
Mr. Conway already said
Okay, so like I was saying, things are very, very similar, but as a family doctor, I know a little about a lot of different areas, but there would be a specialist. Have any of you ever had to go see a specialist doctor other than your basic doctor? Does anybody want to share if you've ever seen a specialist? I know Matthew has. Who have you seen? Who do you go to?
I don't know.
The kidney doctor?
Oh, yeah.
Matthew has a special kidney that has to get checked out, so he goes to see a kidney doctor sometimes. Does anybody else want to share if they've ever been to see a special doctor?
Well, what's your problem?
Go ahead.
For my hearing.
Yeah, that would be a doctor that specializes in the ears, nose, and throat. Okay, so there's also doctors that specialize in the heart, where they know the heart way better than I ever do. Okay, and so I am very good at helping identify if there is a basic problem, and then I can send somebody to a doctor that they went to school with me, but then they went and did extra training in learning all about hearts. Okay, so if there's ever a problem with the heart, does anyone know what a heart specialist doctor is called?
Oh, I bet you do. It's one of those roots we study.
Yeah. A cardiologist, that's right. Very good. Yep, because a lot of terms in the medical field are based off of words that be broken down from often Latin words. So when I'm going to go through and show you some of the stuff on the list here that you guys have been learning about, but a lot of these words are coming from things that originally was a Latin. So if we know the other terms, the basics of some of the terms, we can translate them to other things. Okay? So, does anybody ever get kind of an upset tummy if they see their own blood?
Yes.
Okay. So, if you start feeling kind of, I'm going to uncover the hearts here. So, if you start feeling funny, you sit back down in your chair or sit down on the floor. Okay? And raise your hand and we'll make sure that you are able to feel better. Okay? Okay, so, like I said, we have a bunch of hearts here. Do you guys want, you want to pass those copies around? I'm sure you Matthew was saying that you looked at a circulatory system book.
Yep.
Yes.
And so I bet that is similar to what you looked at there, but that way it's in front of you if you want to look today, okay?
Oh, those are hearts?
So, these are hearts, and they look, yeah, I put that on there so that hopefully I don't get anything dirty, but, okay, so, we are looking at the various parts of the heart. So now, when a animal is taken so that we can get the meat from it, they have to do special inspections to make sure that the meat from the animal is healthy before any human would eat it. So these hearts actually came from a place where we would go to buy meat from the other parts of the animal. So as you can see, a heart actually does look a lot like, what do you think it might look like? Something that we would cook. What do you think?
Meat.
Yeah, so a meat or like a steak, right? Or something along those lines where it has those extra things along the edges. But these hearts, unfortunately, are missing a few of the, just because the way that they were prepared and cut and inspected, they're missing a few of the valves. So we're going to kind of look at our pictures and I'll show you where those things would have been coming out of, okay? So some of these are better than others when we look. So I think this guy was the one that showed us most of the stuff the best. Okay. So, well, actually, I'm going to hold it up here first so you can kind of see. So this is how the heart would be sitting in someone's chest. Okay, so our heart sits slightly to the left, and we call it the left side and the right side, but really in the human body, it all sits slightly to the person's left. Okay, so we've got our left side over here and our right side over here. Like I said, the top part or the atria are actually kind of cut open, so we can see what it would look like here is what the atria would look like, but we have to imagine that it would look like that all the way across there. So we can see inside of that atria there. Okay. Okay, so let's get oriented here. So I just have to sit for a second. Okay. So one of the things we talked about was a thing called the pericardium. Okay. So does anybody have any idea what the part of the word peri might mean? Have we learned that at all?
Who had that word for when we did it? Pericardium? What is it?
It's the outer layer that protects the heart.
Yeah, that's right. So peri means to surround or near. So the pericardium is actually a sac that would go around this. So the pericardium has actually been removed from this, from these specimens that we have. Okay, so that you have to imagine would be a sac that the heart would sit in that sac, and it has fluid in it that allows, when the heart contracts, when this muscle squeezes down, it allows it to slide smoothly through that little sac of fluid that kind of gives a little extra cushion and a little extra protection for the heart. Okay, so other cushion that we see is this stuff here, which is actually a little bit of extra fat. Okay, so fat is a thing on our bodies in lots of different places that provides a little extra protection, cushion, sometimes a little bit of stored energy. But all of these pig hearts actually have a really normal amount of fat on them. They don't have too much extra fat. And that's because pigs don't actually get very old before we take them and make them into pork chops and bacon. So these hearts are fairly young when it comes to that. But sometimes if we were to look at a human heart of someone that had passed away, it might have a lot more fat because that can accumulate over the years. Okay. So the pericardium we don't get a chance to see, so that's gone. But then there is a thing that's called the epicardium. And that is actually this tiny little layer. It's very thin. It's kind of hard to see on this light, but it's a little bit, you can see like how shiny that is. So that's called the epicardium. And that's just a very thin layer that just looks a little bit different than what the muscle does when we're inside the muscle. Is there a light at all to make it any brighter on this? Like, I don't know if it would be the overhead light or if there's like a light. Let me just try to yeah, it's tricky. Yeah. Okay, so you'll get to see it a little better when you come up and look closer later. Okay. All right. So then we have the valves on the inside of the heart. Well, actually, before we go to that, so in order for our organs to function, they have to have blood flow, right? And that blood flow actually comes from the heart, but the heart itself also needs blood flow. So we have these little blood vessels that run along the outside here, that is actually, they have connection from the inside of the heart that it actually pushes the blood around that supplies this muscle. Okay, so we can see there's another blood vessel running on there, and this looks a lot like human hearts do too. So we have that too. Did you guys talk about heart attacks?
Yes.
Okay, so if somebody's heart gets a blockage in one of these vessels, that's actually what a heart attack is. So if you get a blockage in one of these vessels, then this muscle doesn't get the blood flow that it needs in order to pump right. And then sometimes it pumps not the right way, or that can create a lot of pain in someone's chest that will feel like a squeezing, and that's someone is having what we call a heart attack. Okay?
We call that cardiac arrest.
Yes, yep. So, okay. So now we're going to go back to our orientation here. Okay. So, we are looking at the top of the heart here. So this side here, with the way the way I'm holding it, like I'm holding it like it would be coming, I've like just taken it out of my chest, right? So this is the right ventricle down here, and this would be the right atrium. Okay, and like I said, they cut that part off there. But then on this side, we have the left ventricle. So that's the big powerhouse of the heart. Why is the left ventricle so important? I'll let you pick people.
Because it gives the cells like that extra big boost to
Where's it going?
like all the other ones.
Yeah, it's going all over throughout the body, so it's got to get that big
Yeah.
push to get going.
Yeah, and do you guys remember what the left ventricle pushes the blood out through? That big tube? We can actually see it right here.
Starts with an A. Samavita? No? Felicity?
Valve.
So the aorta, right?
Aorta.
Yep. So it does push through the aortic valve. You're right. But this tube would come out and curve up and around.
Remember it's the tunnel?
Mm-hmm.
The arch-shaped tunnel?
Yep. And it has branches that come off of it so that we can get blood flow up to our head and out to our arms, and then it'll go down to the rest of our body. Okay? So inside of that is where we start to look at our valves. Okay? So this is going to be kind of hard to see, I think. But inside here, I'm going to try to hold it really still. Down in there are these little thin flaps. So you see that down in there? It's really floppy. So because these hearts have been kind of handled and they actually were inspected by a safety inspector for the food, the valve is not perfectly intact anymore. And also you kind of need blood going through it in order for it to work the way that it should. But there's flaps of this valve that are collapsed down in there. Okay, and so this is the part down in there that actually a human can borrow this from. We can take that from a pig and put that into a human to help. Okay, so that's the aortic valve. And then we're going to go to one that is a little bit more open. Let's see here, find the right one. Okay, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this one is opened up. So this one here, if we kind of put it originally how it was, okay, this pig was actually a little bit smaller because this heart's not quite as big. And they've actually removed the aorta that would have been right here. And we've got the right ventricle. So if we open it up, this is what it looks like on the inside of the left ventricle. It has these really neat muscles that they're a special kind of muscle. They're called papillary muscles, okay? And if we follow this papillary muscle up, we can see this little cord here, these tiny little strings, okay? And that's actually attaching, unfortunately it's open, so it's harder to see. These parts here, that is the mitral valve, okay? So the mitral valve is controlled. It opens and closes because of these tiny little cords. So the heart has to do a lot of really complicated things, and that's why there's special doctors that focus just on studying the heart, because these muscles have to contract when this muscle out here relaxes. Because when these contract, it pulls these cords down, and that lets that valve here open up. so that all the blood can flow down into it. Well, this is relaxing and getting bigger. So when it's relaxed, it gets bigger so then it can fill with blood. And then when it contracts, it squishes all that blood down and it shoots out your aorta to go to the rest of your body. Okay? So that's the mitral valve. Unfortunately, I don't have a great picture or a great example of the tricuspid valve out of these hearts. So you can kind of see on this side, so we're inside the right ventricle here. We also have some papillary muscles. So the tricuspid valve is the equivalent of the mitral valve, but on the right side. And it has, you know why we would call it tri? How many flaps would it have if it's tri? 3, right? Yep. So we know tri means 3. So we've got the little cords, and that would pull on the flaps, but those flaps are kind of gone. I couldn't really find one that had a good amount of flaps. We might be able to see it in this one later. Okay. So the one valve that really is kind of gone on most of these is the pulmonic valve. Okay. Or you guys called it, I think you call it the venous valve. I think that's what that one is. So the pulmonic valve would be the equivalent of the venous valve, because that's going to be the one that has the blood that actually goes through that to go to our lungs. All right, so we don't have a picture of that, but it would kind of sit actually right behind here. It would be coming out here, and this actually probably is maybe part of it, as it came out from the right atrium to go and split off to go to our lungs. Okay, actually, sorry, it'd be this way. There, it would have been through here. So then, we got another hole here, though. Any thoughts on what this one might be? So this is actually where the blood would come back from our legs. Yep. So this is what we call the inferior vena cava, where it's going to bring the blood back up, the blood that doesn't have oxygen on it. So I'll go back to this one for a second. So if we look at our pictures here, it's this thing here that as it comes up and feeds into that, it's going to help bring that blood flow through so we can get it back in through the right side to push it to our lungs to get oxygen. Okay? All right, so then let's see.
I have a question about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
This is my own.
Yeah.
So we talked about the gas exchange.
Yeah.
The red blood cells with the hemoglobin are dropping off what? Oxygen, and they're picking up carbon dioxide. Does that go through the heart and then go to the lung?
Correct.
Okay, that's
Yep,
what I was
everything dumps into the right atrium, then goes down to the right ventricle, and then it goes out through the pulmonary arteries. So this is actually something that's kind of cool and special. It's kind of a tricky, like a trivia question, because most of the time we think of arteries having blood that has oxygen on it because it's pushing it to places that need the oxygen. But the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins are the only ones where it's flip-flopped, where when we have the pulmonary arteries that come out of the right side, that blood is it's in an artery, but it doesn't have enough oxygen. So it's going to the lungs, and then the pulmonary veins are bringing back oxygenated blood to the heart.
Because it would still have the carbon dioxide attached to it. It hasn't dropped that off yet.
Yep. So the way to remember it is that arteries are always going away from the heart, and veins are always going towards the heart. It's actually not 100% that arteries just always have the oxygen. Okay. And I actually have a picture that we'll talk about that a little bit more, as far as they'll go through the capillary, the idea of what a capillary is and that type of thing. Okay, so we did the blood vessels, the veins, the arteries. So Matthew asked me last night when I was looking at these to make sure I could orient him. He asked where the SA node is. Okay, so the SA node is,
The sinoatrial.
yep, the sinoatrial node. And that's going to be, so that is something that kind of helps initiate the electrical activity of our heart. So the SA node would be up towards the top of the atrium. So that is not going to be shown on the hearts that we have. But even if we had the whole atrium, those types of things, the SA node and the AV node, we really wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye, because those are a little collection of a little bundle of nerves that carry the electrical pulses that move through the heart. And we really can't see that. We can detect the electrical activity with special instruments, so we can map it, like the special doctors can map it to find it, but seeing it with our naked eye, like when they show it on a diagram, when it's on a diagram, they're kind of just pointing to where it usually is. Okay, so the SA node would sit up on top, and then the AV node is in a thing called the septum. So the septum, you guys learned about as one of your vocabulary words. So we actually have multiple septums in our body. Does anybody know where we would have another septum in our body? What do you think?
Probably down close to the right ventricle.
So there's definitely one in the heart, but we actually also have one in our nose. So the thing that divides our nostrils, that's called our nasal septum. So septum just means it divides. So the septum is the part of the muscle. So this thing here that you'll be able to see when you can look closer is the septum. It's dividing the two sides of the heart. Okay? Yeah, we won't go into all that yet. Okay.
I just want to touch it.
Yeah, so, yep, okay, so now and then the chambers are the chambers, so chamber, like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So chamber means room or container, a spot. So the chambers being the 4 spots that we're talking about. So each of these little cavities is going to be considered a chamber of the heart. All right. How are we doing on time? Okay, so I'm going to pull these over. Okay, so you guys had some really good questions. You've been doing a really good job about learning about all this stuff. Okay, so when we look at the circulatory system and we look at how things move through our body, so you learned about, I think you guys were talking about the red blood cells carrying the oxygen to all of our tissue. So our various organs all need oxygen in order to be able to function. So we get these things that are, pumping out through the heart and going out to the various organs. But even down microscopically to the teeniest, tiniest little bit of tissue, that happens through the process called these little capillaries. Okay, so we have arterial capillaries that are carrying, you can picture, this could be inside of your lung. It could be inside, well, I guess lung's a tricky example because it's opposite, but it could be inside of your liver. It could be in your kidney. So all sorts of places, even into your skin. So if you get a tiny cut on the surface of your skin, what's bleeding is actually a capillary, if it's just a tiny little paper clip. Okay, so it goes through those little capillaries and it drops off the oxygen to the tissue that it needs. Then it goes through the venous side of the capillaries, and then it just gets bigger and bigger until it goes back to a vein that then comes all the way back up to the heart so it can get back to the lungs. Okay, there's that one. Okay, so vein capillary. Okay, so then you talked about cells and blood and plasma and all that stuff. So you were asking some really good questions about what plasma is and what we see. So if we took a needle and pulled it from a vein in our arm, okay, and we filled it into a test tube, up to here, and then we put that in a special machine that spins it really, really fast, the red blood cells, or erythrocytes is the other name of that, would go to the bottom. Okay, and that would be about 45% of the amount of blood that we drew out. Okay, then a little bit, 1%, is going to be the other kind of blood cells that we have in our body, which are called white blood cells, and then this other thing called platelets. which are these little tiny things that help our blood clot. So that makes up a small portion. And then the last little bit of it is plasma. Okay, so plasma is, yeah,
That's 101.
you are right. That's a good job, buddy. Thank you for that. So, so 54%. Right. Yeah. Okay. So that is very good, Matthew. I did not notice that when I was finding that, trying to find a picture to explain this to you. So the plasma is mostly water, which you guys talked about, and then it's about 80 to 90% water, and then 10 to 20%. Does that add up? Okay. To of other proteins. Okay, and these proteins make up a lot of different things that do a lot of different stuff for our body. Okay, so that would be things like antibodies. We call them clotting factors, which are things that help us to make a scab if we cut ourselves. Histamine, which histamine is something that if you have allergies, it's because of histamine. Your body is over responding to something it's been exposed to. That flows through in our plasma in our blood. And then another thing called cytokines, which is a kind of protein that it's like a signal. Like different cytokines can do different signals to different tissue in our body that all is flowing through that plasma that's part of our blood. Another thing in there is albumin. So you mentioned, somebody said, I think that maybe it's meat is the last part of the blood. That's sort of right, because albumin, if you kind of clumped albumin together, it's basically these little hunks of protein that are needed so that the fluid in our body stays in the right places. Okay, have you guys learned the term osmosis yet in any of your science stuff? So in the next few years, in one of your science classes, you're going to learn a term called osmosis, and then you'll remember how Matthew's mom was teaching you about how osmosis and albumin keep the fluid in the right spot. Okay, so when you go to medical school, you'll get all that stuff figured out. Okay, somebody have a question? Did somebody? Okay, all right. And so the last thing, so we need, in order for our heart to conduct electricity, we need certain amounts of sodium and potassium and calcium, and that all flows in our bloodstream and our plasma too. Okay, and our bodies, our cells will kind of take that up and help distribute it in ways so it will do the things that it needs to do. It's pretty cool and very complex. Okay, all right, so let me see if I have any other pictures to show you. Oh, this one was just looking at the difference. So this is to show the anatomy of our heart versus the anatomy of the pig's heart. And I know it's kind of hard to see in these pictures, and you guys can look at them closer later. Really, the main difference is that in humans, things start to branch off a lot sooner, and in pigs, it takes longer they still have to branch off, but it doesn't branch off as fast. So that's the biggie. But the valves all look very, very similar. Okay. When a doctor listens to your heart, does anybody know what they're actually listening for?
The lungs.
So we listen to the lungs, but if I'm listening on your chest at the heart, what would it be for?
Heart rate.
So heart rate, yep, but how do we know what the heart rate is? What's making the sound? And how about you back there in the back? Your heartbeat is helping to make the sound, but the sound actually comes from the closing of the valves. So
This is Wesley.
Yes.
Could you send Renayak up to the office with his stuff?
Who is that?
Vinayak.
Oh, Vinayak. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Keep that. Well, keep it here.
yeah, that's yours to keep. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so it's the sound of your valves closing. So the heartbeat sound is lub-dub. Okay, so the first sound is the sound of the mitral and the tricuspid valve closing, and the second sound is the sound of the aortic valve closing. So there you go. Okay, all right. Are you guys ready? Okay. Okay. So let's do, and I actually have extra of these. Do you want to? Okay, can we set it like of the